other decontaminants, bad stuff. They only travel, fortunately, on central nervous system or nervous system tissue. There is a disease that anthropologists were among some of the first to identify this. It was for a long time called slow virus. And that is to say that prions often lurk in a body they inhabit for a long, long time. It may not cause any noticeable things from anywhere from 2 years to up to 20 years. There is a disease. If you Google it, you'll see more of it. A doctor got a part of a huge Nobel Prize, I think, in medicine, if I'm not wrong, the Juzak. This is a disease first noted in 1956 among some New Guinea people called, again, you won't have to know their name, but the Four people, the language-speaking people in New Guinea. It turns out to have a relation. It's a prion disease we now know. It was early called, didn't know what the heck. Slow virus was the term. For years I used that, and we don't know much about it. But among these now, we found out due to cannibalism.
Yeah, because they were eating the brains and, yeah.
Well, what
I
happened
remember
is
reading
it's not clear, but in just a moment you'll see an overhead that looks at the distribution by sex.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that the women and smaller children primarily, and that was a tip-off to look at just how you look at the epidemiology of any disease based on the left down below, for example, age, sex, occupation, lifestyle, nutrition, and genetics. Those are all variables in a host that have some specificity to them, don't they? Out of the blue. What else could you think of? Sex, which incidentally, we don't use gender for many of these things. Gender is more of a social term. Sex is a biological term. And so if we look at osteoporosis, for example, women obviously are more prone to that. And occupation and high-risk things, men, whatever. So we'll discuss some of these things as we move through the course. We'll be utilizing some of these things of the models. So Kuru shows up at a high rate, but it turns out that women prepared the body upon death. And not real clear whether they might have participated in the celebration of the death of the life of that person that did. But either way, there's jungle, nicks and cuts in their hands, and they handled the brain and the nervous system as they were preparing it for burial. And so a perfect place for infection to travel. The kids would be with them, necessarily mom was there. And the men as warriors never, if they did eat and participate, didn't see that as a thing that warriors did, unlike some other places where warriors probably ate a little bit of captives anyway. So that's what happened here, and that's where it kicked off. And then we started finding that, as you know, a few years ago in London, a number of people died. I have a good friend that died from mad cow disease. We do not know where. He was in the Middle East for many years teaching, and it wasn't diagnosed right away because it was unusual. He'd come back to Alaska, and they don't know what he participated in, at what time, because it's sometimes long delay, as I said, up to 15 years is not unusual, certainly 10 years. And that's why we screen cattle very well, and it can really hurt farmers and dairy people if they let these cattle in. And I know a couple of years ago there was up in Canada, there was some that tested for it. If you go down here, degree of virulence, the ability, that's a word you keep in mind, virulence, the ability to make a host sick. Then vectors of the agent. This all makes a difference about how disease moves. Huh? What are some vectors? We had a few up there, but the typical things are fleas, mosquitoes, touchy flies, those kinds of things. Zoonotic. That just means that what is the relationship to animal origin? What things do we get from animals? Well, there's a whole bunch of things, and we'll talk more about that after we get out of hunting and gathers and into agriculture real quick, and that lays the ground for us to talk about bubonic plague. Intermediate hosts and their environment, so how much they survive outside, but genetic mutability, the difficulty with ever developing flu vaccines, a lot of you know this, or the problem with AIDS is it changes its protein coding and how it hangs on and what it presents to the immune system, and just fools it and slips in because it has some of these viruses and bacteria